the architect of her destiny, the tycoon. Kisses his mistress, unaware he despises the true owner of his empire. Breaking news flash. The strobe lights from 1,000 cameras exploded in a silent, white-hot discharge, freezing the moment on the grand stage of the Metropolitan Gala. Richard Stone, the London property titan, a man whose profile was second only to the skyline itself, leaned in. He wasn't leaning toward his wife. He was leaning toward his radiant, much younger protégé, Sierra Vance. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It was a deep, possessive public assertion, delivered for 1,000 lenses. A sudden, sharp, collective gasp was stolen by the click of the shutters. And in the front row, his wife, Eleanor, simply sat, her face a pale, beautiful mask, watching her world detonate. Before you dive into this story of betrayal and silent war, please like and subscribe, so you don't miss a single secret that the Torrens files will expose. 1. The stage of humiliation. The air in the grand ballroom of the Savoy Hotel was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. It was the annual Vanguard Gala, the absolute peak of London's philanthropic calendar. To be here was not simply to have arrived, it was to be the destination. And at the center of this glittering universe, at the head table, sat Richard and Eleanor Stone. Richard was a man carved from ambition and tailored by Savile Row. His charisma was a tangible force, a gravitational pull that drew everyone, investors, politicians, and beautiful women, into his orbit. He was roaring with laughter, a deep, confident sound, his hand resting on the shoulder of Julian Vane, the banking heir. "The Legacy Tower isn't just a building, Julian," Richard boomed, his voice powerful. "It's a statement. It's my statement to this city." Eleanor watched him. She had watched him for 12 years. She was the perfect accessory, draped in a deep emerald silk gown that Richard's personal shopper had selected. It was demure and appropriate. Her brunette hair was pulled back into a bun, so tight it gave her a slight headache. She was the quiet wife, the mystery, the one gossip columnists described as elegant but forgettable. She had no idea. She shifted in her seat, the silk whispering against the velvet chair. Her stomach was a cold, tight knot. This feeling had been her constant companion for 6 months, ever since Sierra Vance had joined Stone Innovations. Sierra was everything Eleanor was not. She was blonde, dazzlingly bright, and barely 25. She had been hired as a brand strategist, a vague title that seemed to involve being photographed beside Richard at every possible opportunity. Tonight, she was sitting just 2 seats away, radiant in a crimson gown that left little to the imagination. And Richard's eyes, even when speaking to Vane, kept finding her. "Eleanor, darling," purred a voice beside her. It was Genevieve Albright, a society dragon whose husband ran a rival firm. "You look serene. Richard is in such good spirits tonight. That new girl, Sierra, such ambition. Reminds me of a young Richard." The veiled insult landed as intended. Eleanor forced a small, tight smile. "Richard has always valued ambition, Genevieve. It's what built his empire." "Oh, his empire, of course," Genevieve countered, her eyes gleaming. "How lovely it must be to be so supportive." Eleanor simply sipped her water. The glass was heavy and cold against her lips. She knew what everyone thought, that she was a nobody, a quiet, mousy woman he had married before he became Richard Stone. They thought she was clinging to him, a beneficiary of his genius. The truth was a heavy, cold secret she had kept for over a decade. Her gaze drifted back to her husband. He was leaning in to hear something Sierra was saying, his head low. their proximity intimate and shocking in its casualness. Sierra laughed, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his forearm. There it was. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. It wasn't just the whispers. It wasn't just the nights he'd justified as strategy sessions. It was this, the sheer, brazen arrogance. Doing it here, in front of Julian Vane, in front of Genevieve Albright, in front of her. A waiter appeared, silent as a ghost, to clear her untouched appetizer plate. She watched him, an anonymous man doing his job, and felt a sudden sharp pang of envy. Anonymity. Freedom. Richard finally rose, tapping his glass for attention. The room, a sea of diamonds and black ties, slowly quieted. "Friends, colleagues, visionaries," his voice began, amplified by the microphone. He owned the room, just as he owned everything. "Tonight, we celebrate not only philanthropy, but progress. We celebrate the future. Stone Innovations is proud to announce our new charitable foundation, a £1 billion pledge to reshape the opportunity landscape for this city's youth." Polite applause. "Then, Robin." Eleanor clapped, feeling a sting in her hand. She knew this foundation. It had been her idea, a way to channel their immense wealth. He had dismissed it 3 months ago as sentimental nonsense. "This company," Richard continued, "was built from nothing. From an idea I had in a small downtown apartment. It was built on grit, on vision, and on a relentless refusal to take no for an answer." Eleanor's headache intensified. His idea. His grit. She felt the sudden metallic taste of bitterness in her mouth. She thought of her father, a quiet man who had built Tormes Industries, a manufacturing empire in northern England. A man who had died too young, leaving his 22-year-old daughter, then an art history student, a fortune so vast it terrified her. A fortune she had learned to manage, to grow, and most importantly, to hide. "But no man builds alone," Richard said, flashing that $1 million smile. "You need a team. You need people who share the vision, people unafraid to push boundaries." This was it. Eleanor knew what was coming. He would thank his COO, James Morton, an old friend of her father, and the only other person in this room who knew the truth. He would thank the board. He might, if she was lucky, give her a cursory nod. "And in the last year," Richard said, his voice softening, "I've been fortunate enough to find a new kind of visionary. Someone who has inspired me, re-energized me. Someone who understands what it means to build a true legacy." He turned, his arm outstretched, not toward his COO, not toward the board, and certainly not toward his wife. "Join me in welcoming the new face of the Stone Foundation and the future of our brand, Sierra Vance." The room was momentarily stunned into silence. This wasn't just an announcement. It was a coronation. Sierra Vance rose from her seat, an image of feigned humility that fooled no one. The crimson dress seemed to glow under the spotlight that instantly found her. She walked to the stage, not as an employee, but as a queen claiming her throne. Richard took her hand, pulling her to center stage. "Sierra," he said, his voice filled with an emotion that was nauseatingly genuine. "You've shown me what true passion looks like." Eleanor watched, motionless. The ballroom, with its 500 guests, had ceased to exist. There was only the stage, a brightly lit tableau of her humiliation. She could feel Genevieve Albright's stare on her, sharp as a physical blow. She could feel James Morton, seated further down, radiating a silent, furious energy in her direction. "And so," Richard declared, his arm around Sierra's waist, "I want to seal this new partnership, this new vision." He was emboldened by the applause, by the power, by the sheer audacity of his own betrayal. He looked at Sierra, who looked back with undisguised adoration. And then he leaned in. 2. The amputation. The kiss. It was the pop, pop, pop of the flashes that broke the spell. A dozen photographers from major papers and magazines had rushed the stage, their lenses capturing the moment that would be on every front page tomorrow. Tycoon kisses mistress at gala. Richard didn't seem to care. He held the kiss, deepening it. A blatant act of dominance. Sierra melted into him, her hand moving up to stroke his jaw. In the front row, Eleanor Stone She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not throw her glass of water, which was the only thing she truly wanted to do. Instead, she carefully placed her folded linen napkin beside her plate. She felt a strange, cold calm wash over her. It was the calm of a surgeon who has just seen the X-ray and knows with absolute certainty that the limb cannot be saved. The only option left is amputation. The applause that followed was scattered, confused, and nervous. Richard, finally breaking the kiss, raised Sierra's hand like a trophy. "The future, ladies and gentlemen!" he shouted. He turned, beaming, and his eyes finally found his wife. He was expecting... what? Tears? A supportive, pained smile? He saw neither. Eleanor met his gaze across the crowded room. Her expression was utterly blank. It was a void so deep it was more terrifying than rage. She held his stare for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then, in one fluid motion, she stood. She didn't bolt. She didn't storm off. She turned her back on the stage, on her husband, and on the life she had endured. She began to walk, her posture perfect, her steps even and unhurried, through the sea of shocked, whispering faces. She walked past Julian Vane, who looked completely bewildered. She walked past Genevieve Albright, whose jaw, for the first time in memory, was slack. Richard's smile faltered. His triumphant expression turned to confusion, then a flash of anger. "Eleanor!" His voice, for the first time, sounded uncertain over the microphone. She did not stop. She did not look back. She pushed open the grand ballroom doors, the sound of her husband's voice and the murmuring of London society drowned out as the heavy oak closed softly, definitively behind her. Outside in the hallway, the air was blessedly cool. She took her first deep breath of the night. It felt as if her lungs were expanding for the first time in a decade. Her hand, which had been perfectly steady, she pulled her phone from her clutch. Not to call a car, not to call a lawyer, not yet. She had to make one call. She found the number and dialed. "James," she said, her voice low and clear, though the tremors now shook her body. "He did it. He really did it." There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "I saw it, Eleanor. I'm right behind you." "What's the protocol?" "The protocol is scorched earth," James replied. "The protocol is scorched earth," Eleanor echoed. The coldness returned, freezing the tremors in her voice. "Call Alistair. Tell him to liquidate my personal holdings in the Cayman Fund. I want the cash by tomorrow morning. And schedule the emergency board meeting. 10 a.m. Monday. It's time they finally met the real investor." 3. The secret of the steal. To understand how a woman like Eleanor could be so completely erased from her own life, you had to understand the Tormes. The Tormes weren't like the Vanes or the Rothschilds. They weren't new money like Richard. They were quiet, industrial, northern money. They manufactured the steel that built the skyscrapers, the turbines that powered the cities. They didn't put their names on opera houses. They put them on ball bearings and circuit boards. Arthur Tormes, Eleanor's father, had despised the flashy glitter of London society. He had raised his daughter to be intelligent, meticulous, and above all, invisible. The loudest man in the room, he used to say, is always the weakest. True power doesn't need to announce itself. When he died of a sudden aneurysm, 22-year-old Eleanor, then an art history student at the University of Cambridge, inherited the entirety of Tormes Industries and its labyrinthine trust, valued at just over $4 billion. She was terrified. She was lost. And then, 6 months later, she met Richard Stone. He was a struggling architect, brilliant and hungry with ambition. He had designs for gravity-defying buildings, but not a penny to his name. He was dazzling. He had no idea who she was. To him, she was just Ellie Tormes, a quiet student working part-time at the university library. She fell in love, not with his charm, but with his drive. He saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. He was the architect. She believed, could be the silent benefactor. She wanted him to love her, not the Tormes fortune. So she devised a plan, utilizing her father's fiercely loyal, old family solicitor, Alistair Finch. She created a ghost. They established Aegis Holdings, a private equity firm based in a tax haven, with her funds channeled through a series of offshore accounts. It was impenetrable. The sole director and beneficiary was listed as E.A. Tormes, a name that meant nothing to the financial world. Aegis Holdings made its first investment in a promising young architect, Richard Stone. When he proposed a year later, she was ecstatic. He loved her. He had no idea. She insisted on a prenup, which he signed willingly, laughing. "I have nothing to protect, Ellie," he had told her, "and I'll soon be making so much money that I'll be the one asking you for a prenup." She had smiled and signed, keeping her £4.2 billion secret safe. For the first few years, it was perfect. He built his first boutique hotel, then his first apartment tower. Aegis Holdings was his silent, supportive partner, always greenlighting his, admittedly, brilliant proposals. He thought Aegis was a faceless European fund. Eleanor, meanwhile, played the part of the supportive, modest wife. She managed their homes, hosted small dinners, and secretly ran Aegis. She was the one who greenlit land purchases. She was the one who scrutinized zoning laws. She was the one who studied the market, funneling her father's meticulous genius into spreadsheets and risk assessments. Stone Innovations became an empire. Richard became a media god. And slowly, he began to believe his own press. He forgot the struggling architect. He forgot the small initial fund that took a risk on him. He believed, with the zealotry of a true narcissist, that he had done it alone. And as he grew, Eleanor shrank. He began to see her as he saw his first modest apartment, a relic of his humble past. She was too quiet, too simple. He needed someone to match his energy. Eleanor saw the change. She saw the new assistants, the late nights, the emotional distance. But she was trapped in the gilded cage she had built herself. If she revealed the truth, that she was not just his wife, but his owner, it would detonate the one thing she had always wanted, the belief that he had, at some point, loved her and not her money. James Morton, her father's former COO, and the one Stone Innovations board member she had personally installed as Aegis Holdings representative, had warned her. "He's spiraling, Eleanor," James had told her a year ago in a secret meeting at her club. "He's leveraging company assets for vanity projects. The Legacy Tower is a money pit. He's cooking the numbers on the projections to make it look good. He's ambitious. He's reckless," James countered, "and he's disrespectful, not just to the board, but to you. You built this. Don't let this peacock burn your father's legacy to the ground." Then came Sierra. Sierra was the final, brutal escalation. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a public replacement. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was installing his mistress in the company that she owned. When Eleanor walked out of the gala, she wasn't just walking out on her marriage. She was walking out on the ghost of Ellie Tormes. The quiet, supportive, invisible wife was gone. Alistair Finch, her solicitor, had been waiting for this call for 5 years. He had the Armageddon files ready. When James called him from the palace lobby, Alistair's only response was, "It's about time." Eleanor spent the night not in their Mayfair penthouse, Richard's penthouse, but in a secure suite at the Ritz Hotel, a hotel her father had always preferred. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the lights of the city she owned, and methodically dismantled her husband's life, one email and one phone call at a time. She transferred the liquidity from the Cayman Fund to a new master account in her full legal name, Eleanor Tormes Stone. She had Alistair draft the emergency motions. She reviewed the final, devastating audit of the Legacy Tower project, proving Richard had been channeling millions into offshore accounts in Sierra Vance's name. She had shielded him from his own greed for years, quietly covering his mistakes, redirecting funds to mask his failures. Not anymore. The sun rose over Hyde Park, and Eleanor, dressed in a simple, severe charcoal suit, drank her first cup of coffee. It tasted like victory. 4. Contempt of the board, Hevel. Richard woke up on Monday morning to a splitting headache and a public relations hurricane. His phone was a nuclear bomb of missed calls and messages. The front page of the Daily Mail was a full bleed photo of the kiss, headlined, "Mistress from Riches to Ruin. Stone dumps wife in gala scandal." Vanity Fair had an online piece titled, "The Silent Mrs. Stone Finally Speaks by Walking Out." He was furious, not with himself, but with Eleanor. How dare she? How dare she humiliate him by walking out? She was supposed to be the quiet one. She was supposed to sit there, take it, and then they'd have a civilized argument at home. She had made him look like the villain, and he stormed into the Stone Innovations offices at 8 a.m., barking at his secretary, "Get me Sierra and get me legal! Get!" Sierra arrived, looking rattled for the first time. "Richard, the press is everywhere. They're calling my family. They're saying horrible things." "Let them talk," Richard snapped, pulling her into his office. "This is a power play, that's all. Eleanor is having a little tantrum. We're going to shut it down. Today." "How?" "By cutting her off and firing her only ally on the board, James Morton." Richard paced. His energy vibrated with malice. "He's always been her little spy. He represents Aegis. I'm calling an emergency meeting, exposing him for financial malfeasance. I'll make something up, who cares? And I'll install Sierra in his seat." "On the board?" Sierra's eyes widened with greed. "On the board," he confirmed. "Aegis Holdings has 60%. Yes, but they are a silent partner. They have never voted against me. They vote with the CEO. That's the deal. My 30% plus the 10% from the other board members gives me the majority over Morton. He's out. You're in. And when Eleanor comes crawling back, she'll find her allowance cut and her friend fired." He was so engrossed in his own plan that he barely registered his secretary calling. "Sir, you have an email from Alistair Finch's office on behalf of Aegis Holdings." "What?" Richard grabbed the printout. It was a formal notification. An emergency board meeting had been called for 10 a.m. The agenda item, a full audit and review of the Legacy Tower project, and a vote on the removal of Richard Stone as CEO. Richard laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "They've challenged me. That old fool Morton. He thinks he can scare me." He looked at Sierra. "He's provoked a war he can't win. Aegis has no authority to remove me. The CEO position is unassailable." He tore up the memo. "Come on. I'm going to enjoy firing him to his face." At 9:58 a.m., Richard Stone strode into the 50th floor boardroom. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, overlooking the city he thought he owned. The board members were already there, a collection of stony-faced men and one woman, Genevieve's sister, who looked terrified. James Morton was at one end of the table, looking calm. "James," Richard said, his voice dripping condescension as he took the head seat. "A bold move, calling a meeting to overthrow me. Did you forget who I am? Did you forget who signs your checks?" "I know exactly who you are, Richard," James said, his voice even. "And I know exactly who signs the checks. Let's wait for the representative from Aegis Holdings before we begin." Richard scoffed. "Aegis doesn't send representatives. They send proxy forms, and they always vote with me. So let's get this over with." The boardroom doors opened. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a banker. It was Eleanor. She was no longer the woman from the gala. The emerald silk was gone, replaced by a charcoal gray suit, severe and perfectly tailored. Her hair wasn't in a demure bun. It was pulled back into a tight, powerful ponytail. She carried a leather briefcase. Beside her was a man Richard vaguely recognized, Alistair Finch, a dry-as-dust solicitor. Richard's blood ran cold. "Eleanor, what is this? This is a closed-door board meeting. You can't be here." Eleanor didn't look at him. She walked to the empty seat directly across from him, the one reserved for the principal shareholder. She sat down. Alistair Finch stood behind her. "Mrs. Stone," James Morton said formally, "thank you for coming on such short notice." "What is going on?" Richard demanded, raising his voice. Eleanor finally looked at him. Her eyes were not sad or angry. They were the color of steel. "You're right, Richard," she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the silent room. "This is a closed-door board meeting, and I am here representing the majority shareholder." Richard stared. "You? You represent them? Did James manipulate you into this? This is a joke." "Alistair," Eleanor said simply. The old solicitor stepped forward and began placing a thick, bound document in front of every board member. "Aegis Holdings," Alistair began, his sharp voice cutting the tension, "is a registered private equity firm. It is, and has been for 12 years, the sole funding entity for the corporation known as Stone Innovations. Aegis Holdings controls 60% of the voting stock in this company. Its board consists of one person, the sole managing director and 100% beneficiary of the Torms Trust, which is Aegis Holdings." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Alistair said, "allow me to formally introduce you to your investor, Mrs. Eleanor Torms Stone." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was so quiet that the sound of a single paper rustling as Genevieve's sister nervously flipped a page was like a gunshot. Richard Stone's face went through a rapid, grotesque series of transformations. First, blank confusion. Then, a sick, dawning comprehension. Then, a dark, purple rage. "You," he croaked, his voice breaking. "You, Ellie!" "My name is Eleanor," she stated, "and you will address me as Mrs. Stone." This is fraud," Richard stammered, leaping out of his seat. "You misled me. You lied to me for 12 years. This is my company. I built this." "You built nothing," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through his hysteria. "You were an architect with a blueprint. I bought the land. I paid for the steel. I funded the payroll. Stone Innovations was a subsidiary of my company, Richard, a company I allowed you to run, believing you were a partner, not a parasite." She pulled her gaze from him, addressing the stunned board. "Gentlemen, we are here today because Mr. Stone has been actively sabotaging this corporation for the last 2 years. He has done so by funneling company resources into a personal vanity project, the Legacy Tower, which our independent auditors," she nodded to Alistair, who distributed a second set of documents, "have confirmed is currently £1.2 billion over budget and is structurally defective." James Morton interjected. I tried to warn the board. Mr. Stone provided falsified projections to hide the losses. Furthermore, Eleanor continued, Mr. Stone has been misappropriating funds for personal use. Specifically, the transfer of £3 million to an offshore account in the name of Sierra Vance. Genevieve's sister gasped, clamping a hand over her mouth. This is slander, Richard roared, slamming his fists on the table. You, a housewife, think you can come in here with these lies? They are not lies, Mr. Stone. Alistair Finch's voice was razor sharp. We have the wire receipts. We have the bank records. You used company funds to purchase her apartment, her car, and as of last week, a 2-carat diamond ring, all classified as promotional and marketing expenditures. Richard was cornered. He was a trapped predator, and now he turned vicious. You did this, he screamed at Eleanor. You set me up. You let me believe I was in charge, just so you could pull the rug out. What kind of sick game is this? You were jealous. You were jealous of Sierra. You were jealous of my success. Eleanor rose slowly. She was 2 inches shorter than him, but in that moment, she towered over him. I was not jealous of your success, Richard. I was proud of it. I funded it. I celebrated it. I did everything anonymously because I was a fool. I was a fool who believed you loved me and that my money would poison that. Her voice was ice. But you didn't need my money to poison you. Your ego did that all by itself. You disrespected me in private for years. I tolerated it. You minimized me. You manipulated me. You made me feel small. I tolerated it. But on Saturday night, you disrespected my father's legacy. You used the company he built to publicly humiliate me and crown your mistress. And that, Richard, I will not tolerate. She looked to the board. The agenda item for this meeting is a vote to remove Richard Stone as CEO, effective immediately, for gross negligence, misappropriation of funds, and breach of fiduciary duty. James, please proceed with the vote. Wait! Richard shrieked, his composure utterly shattered. He was sweating through his expensive shirt. You can't! The shares, my 30%! Your 30%, Alistair interjected, was not earned, Mr. Stone. It was a gift of stock from Aegis Holdings, a gift that, per the key clause in your employment contract, is forfeited upon termination for cause. You, Richard, own nothing. You never did. Richard looked at the faces around the table. They were not his allies. They were investors on a sinking ship, and Eleanor had just thrown them the only lifeline. All in favor of the motion to remove Richard Stone? James asked. Eleanor's hand went up. James's hand went up. Genevieve's sister's hand went up. One by one, every other board member raised their hand. It was unanimous. Richard stared at Eleanor, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terrifying, primal hatred. You witch! You won't get away with this! I'll destroy you! Tell them what, Richard? Eleanor asked, picking up her briefcase. Tell them I'm not a simple wife. Tell them I'm the one with the money. Please, you'd be doing me a favor. She gestured to the 2 large security guards who had just appeared at the door. Mr. Stone is trespassing. Escort him out of my building. The security guards, both imposing men who usually handled union disputes on construction sites, moved toward Richard. Don't touch me, he screamed, backing away. This is my office. This is my building. It was never yours, Richard, James Morton said, his voice laced with a cold satisfaction he had suppressed for a decade. You were only renting it. Richard, seeing the guards closing in, turned pathetic. The rage turned to a desperate, whimpering plea. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes wide and suddenly wet. Ellie, please don't do this. Think of us. Think of the 12 years. I love you. I've always loved you. Sierra was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It was the pressure. You know the pressure I'm under. Eleanor watched him. her expression unreadable. She had waited half her life to hear him say he loved her, and mean it. And here it was, a desperate lie from a drowning man. "The pressure," she repeated, her voice empty of emotion. "Yes, I know all about the pressure, Richard. The pressure of watching the man you love turn into a monster. The pressure of hiding your own mind so his ego wouldn't be bruised. The pressure of knowing that one word from me could have ended you at any time, and not saying it." She shook her head. "It's over. Get him out." "No!" he shrieked as the guards grabbed his arms. "You can't! I'll sue you! I'll—" The boardroom doors burst open again. This time, it was Sierra. She must have heard the screams from Richard's office down the hall. "Richard, what's going on? Who are these men?" She saw Eleanor, and her face contorted into a triumphant smirk. "Oh, you're here. Did you come to beg him to take you back? Too late, darling. Richard and I—" "Shut up, you idiot!" Richard roared, struggling against the guards. "You have no idea what you've done." Sierra's smirk vanished, replaced by confusion. "What?" "Miss Vance, your employment at this company is terminated, effective immediately. Your corporate accounts have been frozen, and the company letting agent on the property on Regent Street will require you to vacate the flat by 5 o'clock this afternoon." You can't fire me," Sierra stammered, looking to Richard for help. "Richard, tell her." "He can't tell me anything, Miss Vance," Eleanor said. "Richard no longer works here." The color drained from Sierra's face as she finally understood. She wasn't the queen. She was the jester, and the show was over. "But the foundation," she whispered. "The gala. He promised me." "He promised you things that were never his to give," Eleanor said. She gestured to the guards. "Escort them both out." The removal was swift. Richard, realizing his pleas were futile, reverted to rage. He kicked and cursed, a volley of vile insults directed at Eleanor, at James, at her father. "You'll be bankrupt in a year, you simpleton." The door slammed shut, cutting him off. The 50th floor boardroom was silent once more. Eleanor let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 12 years. She sank into the chair at the head of the table. Her chair. The board members looked at her, a mixture of awe, fear, and deep respect in their faces. "Well," Genevieve's sister said in the silence, "that was thorough." Eleanor managed a small, tired smile. "My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. I prefer a quieter management style. That was an unfortunate but necessary house cleaning." James Morton cleared his throat. "The motion carries. Richard Stone is removed. That leaves the CEO and chairman position vacant." He looked at Eleanor. "The board is prepared to accept nominations." Alistair Finch stepped forward. "I nominate Eleanor Torms Stone as interim CEO and permanent chairman of the board of directors." "I second the motion," James said instantly. "All in favor?" Every hand went up. "It is decided then," James said. "Congratulations, Madam Chairman." Eleanor looked out the window. The city skyline, her skyline, stretched out before her. The Legacy Tower, half built and shrouded in scaffolding, was a testament to her husband's ego. "Thank you," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to call our head of demolition. It's time to take that building down to the steel and start again. The right way." Epilogue. The architect of her life. 3 months later, the sign outside the building did not read Stone Innovations. It simply read Tormes Group. The 50th floor office, once a cavern of dark mahogany, black leather, and self-satisfied portraits of Richard, was now unrecognizable. Eleanor had gutted it. It was now open, airy, and filled with light, glass, and blueprints for projects that were innovative, sustainable, and, above all, profitable. The Legacy Tower scandal had been brutal. The press had feasted on the vengeance of the scorned wife. Richard, true to his word, had tried to destroy her. He gave scathing interviews, painting her as a manipulative, cold-hearted puppet master. It backfired, spectacularly. When Alistair Finch, on behalf of the Tormes Group, released the full forensic audit, the embezzlement, the fraud, the offshore accounts in Sierra's name, the narrative shifted. Richard was not a victim. He was a fraudster. Sierra was the laughingstock. Richard was now drowning in lawsuits, not just from the board, but from contractors, lenders, and the FCA. His 30% of shares was worthless, reabsorbed by the company. He had lost everything. The last Eleanor heard, he was living in a rented flat outside London, desperately trying to find a law firm that would take his case. Eleanor, meanwhile, had become a legend. The silent Mrs. Stone was silent no more. She was the matriarch of London, the Tormes Titan. Forbes had put her on the cover, detailing the story of the hidden multi-billion-pound fortune and the woman who had run an empire from her living room. She sat at her new desk, signing the final blueprints for the Recovery Tower project. It was being redesigned as mixed-income housing and a green tech incubator. It was a project her father would have been proud of. James Morton, now her official COO, knocked and entered. "Madam Chairman, the divorce papers. Final decree just came through from the judge." He placed the document on her desk. She looked at it. Stone v. Stone. It was done. She was, in the eyes of the law and the world, entirely her own person. "Thank you, James," she said, signing the acknowledgement. "He's contesting the prenup." "Of course," James said. "Alleges emotional distress and coercion." Eleanor laughed. It was a real, genuine laugh. "Let him. Alistair will have fun with that. Send him a £1 check for services rendered." "Services. For 12 years, Eleanor said. "He was my shadow. He taught me exactly what not to do." "That's worth something," James smiled. "Well, the new architects are here for the 2 p.m. meeting, and Genevieve Albright is in the lobby. She's chairing the new foundation committee and wanted to personally review the gala plans with you." "Send her in," Eleanor said. Genevieve, once her social tormentor, walked into the office, her eyes wide. "Eleanor, this room is stunning. I love the light." "We all do," Genevieve said, her voice tinged with a new, genuine respect. "We all do." After the meeting, Eleanor stood alone by the window. She thought of that night at the gala, the humiliation, the cold knot of fear, the flashes. She had walked into that ballroom as Richard Stone's wife, an accessory, a ghost. She walked out as Eleanor Tormes. She hadn't wanted this fight. She had never wanted the spotlight. She had only wanted a partner. But Richard, in his boundless arrogance, had given her something else. He had tried to break her. Instead, he had set her free. She looked out at the city. It wasn't just the skyline. It was a canvas. And for the first time in her life, she held the paintbrush. She was no longer the silent investor. She was, and always had been, the architect. The story of Eleanor Tormes is a brutal, shocking, and ultimately empowering reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She didn't just take back her life. She took back her name, her legacy, and her identity. Richard tried to steal her company. He tried to steal her name. But he gave her, in his blind arrogance, the one thing she never knew she was missing, her voice. But what do you think? Was Eleanor's decade of silence a necessary protection, or a mistake that allowed a monster to grow? What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of incredible betrayal and vengeance captivated you, please hit the like button. It truly helps the channel. And most importantly, subscribe and tap the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next story we uncover.